Welcome back, everybody. Well, a couple of months ago, I guess it was September, the 20th anniversary of the September 11th attacks, I did a video talking about my memories from that day. I was thinking about this in light of how right now we're watching a historic event unfold on TV with what's happening in Eastern Europe with Russia and Ukraine. And I thought, why not do this every so often? Why not take some time just to talk about what I remember about some event that happened in history that I experienced in my lifetime. And all of us have those stories, right? We all are going to have those moments that we remember. We're all going to have stories to tell about the COVID pandemic many years from now, and hopefully it's all a memory. We're all going to have stories to tell about when we first saw and heard the news about some celebrity dying tragically. Someone like Whitney Houston or Heath Ledger are some of the ones that I remember in my lifetime, Kurt Cobain. So I thought I would take some time today because for some reason, stuff started popping up on YouTube. And once you click on a video or two of something on YouTube, you start getting a bunch of other stuff recommended about that. And so for the last couple of hours, I've been down this rabbit hole of NASCAR. I was never really huge into NASCAR growing up. But I moved to southern Indiana in 1998, and it was huge there. A lot of Jeff Gordon fans there because Jeff Gordon's from Indiana, and so it kind of became this thing that we did. Was after church on Sunday, we went back to the house and you watch NASCAR. And for years, that's what I did on Sunday afternoon was watch NASCAR. And my uncle Mike was really into Mark Martin, so Mark Martin became my favorite driver. And so I was really into NASCAR for a while and got my wife into it a little bit. In fact, when my daughter was, when we found out we were going to have a little girl, right after my wife said she was pregnant with our first child, and I got excited, one of the first things I did was I went to the store and I bought little girl hat and booties and stuff of Dale Earnhardt Jr. I don't know why that's who I picked. It's maybe what they had available. But I'll never forget the day. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was at the church. We had youth group on Sunday night, and I was a youth pastor. And so usually by about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I was at the church getting ready for our youth group that night. And I was in the gym of our church, and the gym is right there. It's also kind of served as our fellowship hall, and the kitchen was right by there, and there was a phone there. And somebody told me that my wife was on the phone, because before cell phones, things like that. And I got on the phone, and she said, "Did you see the end of the Daytona 500?" This was 2001. Daytona 500, biggest race, of the NASCAR season. It happens right at the beginning. And, this is like the Super Bowl for NASCAR. This is huge. It doesn't get any bigger than that. And she said, "Did you see what happened at the end of the Daytona 500?" And I said, "No, I had to leave before it was over." I will never, ever forget these words. I can hear her saying it. She said, "Sweetie, Dale Earnhardt died." And you have to understand, this is the biggest race of the year. This is probably the most popular driver in the history of NASCAR. One of the greatest drivers, won as many championships as anybody, won 7 championships. This is like Michael Jordan dropping dead of a heart attack in the last 2 minutes of Game 7 of the NBA Finals. I mean, that's literally what this was. This was the last lap of the Super Bowl of racing, and the most popular, one of the greatest drivers of all time, dying in the last turn of the last lap. In fact, let's take a look at it, and I want to just talk a little bit about what that was like. Set up the background a little bit on this. Maybe you're not familiar with the story. Maybe you don't follow NASCAR. Drivers have owners, just like a sports team has an owner. And oftentimes, drivers who drive for another owner also own their own team that other drivers drive for, and that was the case here. Michael Waltrip driving the 15 car, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. driving the number 8 Budweiser car. Both were drivers for DEI, Dale Earnhardt Incorporated. Their cars were owned by Dale Earnhardt, who drove for Richard Childress Racing, another company. It's complicated, I know. So, biggest race of the year. Last lap of the Daytona 500. First, second, and third place are Michael Waltrip, owned by Dale Earnhardt, Dale Earnhardt Jr., owned by Dale Earnhardt, and then Dale Earnhardt. And in a race like Daytona, you do a lot of drafting. You get behind somebody to try to slingshot around them, things like that. And so if somebody behind you is faster than you, you can hopefully kind of block them. And that's what Dale Earnhardt's trying to do. He's trying to keep a car behind him. I think it was Sterling Marlin, who's got a really fast car and could potentially pass these cars owned by Dale Earnhardt, including his son and his friend Michael Waltrip. And so he's trying to protect them. He's trying to hold off this faster car behind him so the two guys ahead of him whose cars he owns can win the race. And that's when it happens.
Got a couple of corporate teammates, Waltrip and Earnhardt Jr. Then the man who owns those cars, Dale Earnhardt.
This crowd is on their feet. They want to see the finish of the Daytona 500. They'll look at the white flag. They go back to turn one for the final time.
We'll soon find out. Michael Waltrip doing everything he can to hold on to the race lead. He has to go low to block Dale Earnhardt Jr. He keeps it pinned down low. Earnhardt Jr. still riding in second. They're all chasing Michael Waltrip on the super stretch.
Does Earnhardt Jr. have anything left? He's going to try. Waltrip to the bottom, trying to throw on the block. Successful so far. 3 wide behind, halfway down the back straightaway. Waltrip with maybe a 1 car length lead over Earnhardt Jr. to 3.
Michael Waltrip showing the muscle. Everything stacks up from third on back. Dale Earnhardt gets turned sideways. He'll take Schrader. Earnhardt and Schrader are in the wall. Waltrip leads off 4.
Coming down to the finish, though, it is Michael Waltrip trying to hold off Dale Earnhardt Jr. in 463 tries. Finally, Michael Waltrip is going to win a NASCAR Winston Cup race, winning the Daytona 500, the biggest of them all. Dale.
On the surface, it didn't look that bad. I think earlier in that same race, there had been this awful wreck where I want to say it was Tony Stewart went flying in the air and flipping over and over again. And that one looked really bad. This one just looked like him going off into the wall. It didn't look that bad until you understand the physics involved and things like that. When a wreck happens and people go flying and stuff like that, those cars are built for that. They've got roll cages. They've got all kinds of protections built in. What no car can protect you from is going from 200 miles an hour to a dead stop. And that's what happened, and that's why this wreck was so bad. He went full speed right into the wall in a dead stop, and I think he was pretty much dead instantly. He died from a basal skull fracture, which is basically like a fracture of the back part of your skull, and that's where all the stuff is that keeps you alive. They're just really I'm not going to show it all, but they show the driver of the car here getting out of his car, and he comes over to check on Dale, and he's instantly calling for help. He knew right away how really, really bad this was. And one of the heartbreaking moments in all of this is in the booth announcing for this race was Darrell Waltrip, another great NASCAR driver who had had some big run-ins with Dale Earnhardt over the years. They didn't always see eye to eye, but they had been rivals. And Darrell's little brother Michael has just won the Daytona 500. This is like the biggest race ever. I think this might have been Michael Waltrip's first victory in NASCAR. And so on one hand, you're trying to be excited for your little brother who just won the biggest race there is. But then immediately he's thinking of Dale. In fact, let me pull that up for you.
Darrell, is this better than winning it?
Oh, it's better. This is great. I hope Dale was okay. I guess he's all right, isn't he?
So, I mean, those are some of the things you start to remember. Just that heartbreaking scene, and you're feeling awful for the Earnhardt family. I mean, they should be on top of the world right now, and poor Michael Waltrip can't even celebrate. He just won the Daytona 500, and forever it's going to be associated with the race where Dale Earnhardt died. And, of course, very soon after they make the announcement, Mike Helton, I think, was the president of NASCAR, gets up there and says, this is undoubtedly the most difficult announcement I've ever personally had to make. But at the end of the Daytona 500, after the crash in Turn 4, we've lost Dale Earnhardt. And, I mean, it was just, that was impossible. Everybody, I mean, you knew that these things happen. There are deaths. I think Richard Petty, who's another one, there's 3 drivers who have won 7 championships. Richard Petty, Dale Earnhardt, and Jimmy Johnson. Richard Petty, I think it was his grandson, Adam Petty, was killed in a race, or in practice maybe. There have been other popular drivers that have died in races, but I mean, this was just impossible to believe it could have happened. But that's not where the story ends. I mean, because they got to get back to racing, and they're at Rockingham the next week, I think it is. And that's when the crazy, like, there are moments in history where things happen and you're like, there's no way. I mean, if you made that a movie script, people would just find it too impossible to believe. They wouldn't make the movie because nobody would buy something like that. Examples of that are like the story of Desmond Doss. They actually toned down how many people's lives he saved for the movie because they didn't think anybody believed that he did what he actually did. And it's true. For the movie The Death of Stalin, which is kind of a dark comedy, but you see Marshal Zhukov with all of these medals all over his chest, and they actually show fewer medals than he actually had because, again, it just would have been over-the-top ridiculous to actually show the truth. Sometimes history is stranger than fiction, they say. And that's what happens in the aftermath of this, because the following week, at the very next race, a car owned by Dale Earnhardt, Steve Park, I think was the number 1 car, wins the race. And that in and of itself would have been crazy. But then I think it was a few weeks after that they took the team that was the number 3 car, Dale Earnhardt's car, and they got a rookie driver, Kevin Harvick, made it to 29, I think it was. Same cars, they just repainted it, put a new number on it, same team and everything. And he wins a race. And then they go back to Daytona. There are 2 races every year at Daytona. The Daytona 500 at the beginning of the season, and in the middle of the season, they have another race at Daytona. And you could not, I don't think there was a person alive who didn't want to see that end the way that it did. Let's take a look.
He runs so good through the corner, he lets him get a run on him down the straightaway.
Michael Waltrip dives underneath Bobby Labonte. They bump on the backstretch. Waltrip to second. Elliott Sadler and Rusty Wallace with him.
Coming behind you.
Now 2 team cars race in the 1 and 2 positions.
That's who Dale needs to see in his rearview mirror right now. That's the best thing he can see.
Will Michael Waltrip block for Dale Jr.? Will he try to win the race himself? White flag is out. Final lap at Daytona. 180,000 on their feet, screaming wildly. 2.5 miles to go.
Just exactly the opposite of the Daytona 500. It was 15 and 8. Elliott Sadler is trying to keep Bobby Labonte behind him. Can't do it. But he does move down in front of Rusty Wallace on that fast line.
All clear.
Bobby Labonte looking for some help, trying to get up there. His teammate Tony Stewart has never answered the black flag.
And they're 4 wide back between the Wallace boys.
Here they come, turn 4, final lap of the Pepsi 400. Michael Waltrip in second, but it's going to be Dale Earnhardt Jr. using lessons learned from his father to go from 6th to 1st and score the victory in the Pepsi 400.
That's unbelievable.
Yes!
That man behind you did it for
Yes!
you. You guys celebrate. You love you, man. You did it.
That was beautiful. Very, very.
So you even hear the guys in the booth going, yes! I mean, like, I don't think there was anybody alive who didn't want to see that finish that way. Dale Earnhardt Jr. comes back to the track, the very first race after his father's death, and wins the race, and Michael Waltrip's in second. And, there was some, I don't know, some sort of closure, some sort of full circle about that. Like it was going to be okay, like this is all right. We're going to make it through this. And I think any of us who have experienced loss, especially tragic, difficult loss like Dale Earnhardt Jr. did with the loss of his dad, those moments when it's the first time where you're like, okay, you know what? It's not going to be easy. It's never going to be the same, but I think we're going to get through this. I think we're going to be all right. And that was one of those moments. And I think for NASCAR as a whole, for NASCAR, it was like, okay, we can keep going. We can still enjoy this. We can still celebrate things that happen, and we don't have to be sad all the time anymore. And there were just some really cool moments about that, like seeing Michael Waltrip and Dale Earnhardt Jr. both up on the car, just so excited for each other. And there's even a moment where you hear the announcer saying, "Go ahead, Michael, you can have this moment too," because Michael gets up on the car and celebrates, even though he got second, because he never really got to celebrate his Daytona 500. And there were other memories from that time. There was a memorial service they had for Dale Earnhardt that was powerful, and but one of those things I'll never ever forget. If you want to see more of these, let me know. Use the comment section below. I'm going to throw up a link to me sharing my thoughts from September 11th. If you want to go and watch that video talking about what I remember about that day. And I'll probably make this an occasional series of things that I'll do here and there, talking about my memories from different events. If you remember this day, what do you remember about it? What stands out to you? How did you feel? What did you experience about that day? Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching.